Hi, Robin. Welcome to the Sisterhood.
Hey, Krista, thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here.
Okay, so where are you?
I am in Middle Georgia, about an hour south of Atlanta, in Macon. Really sleepy southern town, but Hollywood has come here all of a sudden. They are filming all the things here. There's a Marvel movie in town right now. Scarlett Johansson has been sighted. So,
Wait, how did Georgia, this little town in Georgia, become the movie star haven?
well, I think because the downtown area is in a season where it's being revitalized. So there are a lot of storefronts that are ideal for apparently movie settings somehow. We have a train station. That's where they were shooting yesterday. And a few weeks ago, Ron Howard was in town with Glenn Close. They were filming Hillbilly Elegy.
Oh, you're
Oh,
kidding. I love
wow.
that
Yeah,
book.
yeah.
Okay, that book is fantastic.
I, you know how I found out about it? I was downtown for lunch, and there were all their chairs just in a row. And I'm like, what the heck? And somebody said, oh, there's some movie going on about some church thing. I'm like, you haven't read the book when I found out. So, yeah, so that's Macon, Georgia, right in the middle of Georgia.
Well, and the weather's probably good for filming, so that probably helps too, right? You've got hot weather.
Hot is an understatement. I don't think we'll ever see fall. I am envying you and Alex right now because of your area of the country. Look at me. I'm sleepless right now. So it's warm. I do love
Yeah.
summer. I do like a little bit of change though. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is it pretty where you are in Georgia?
oh gosh, yes. You should come and visit. I will take you
Okay,
on
I'm
a
coming,
tour.
Robin.
Yeah, we're going to show you all the things
Will
because
you hook me up with Ron Howard when I'm there?
give me advance notice. We'll see what I can do.
Okay.
You might be surprised.
No, but I've heard it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a great place. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to raise a family. It has been a good home for us for 6 years. So we are not long-term Macon people, but relatively short.
Okay, and tell us about your family.
Well, call myself a new empty nester because it was really official in May when my baby, who is 22, graduated college and got a job. So that's my youngest is a son working in Atlanta, not far away. Got a middle kiddo in our previous hometown in Chattanooga, for working for a big insurance company there in finance. And then my oldest is a daughter, Rachel, and she is in Denver, Colorado. A
Whoop.
neighbor. Yep, I'm hearing a shout out over there. I knew that would connect. And she is working in ministry, poverty ministry there in Denver, doing great work for the world, for her area, for the lives of people she gets to rub shoulders with. And my husband is here in Middle Georgia. We joke, he is a miner, MINER, chalk mines in Middle Georgia. And so actually Tad is an engineer and he is my college sweetie. We have been married 32 years in November. So quite a while.
Wow, that is so fun. Have you guys ever done something really different for one of your anniversaries over the past 32 years?
Oh gosh, yes. Some of that is not meant for public consumption. That's what keeps
Wow, hubba.
that's what keeps the marriage going for 32 years. Yeah, no, it hasn't been all roses and sunshine, but we were given a gift the year we turned 50, which was a few years ago. We were given a gift of a job change, and it led us to Germany for a year while he trained with that job. And so that anniversary was a visit to London. We were, well, it was a plane ride away, but we were close. So fantastic.
Yeah, how
Yeah.
fun.
It was a whole year of anniversary. Yeah. A gift.
Yeah. What a fun year. Did you have kids at home still, or everyone was at
Uh,
school?
well, I had two in college and one in high school. It made it really tricky because, of course, we wanted to be together as much as we could. So for the most part, I lived there and worked out arrangements with the kids as we needed. And I tell you, what made it possible was who my children are. They were the kind of people that allowed us to do something like that, and they were on board. So we spent a lot of time divided with family and friends helping us. And then they were there as much as they could be. They were there for the summer. My youngest was able to go to school there for 6 weeks. He sat in a German classroom and he helped teach English during that time. But for the most part, he was just a trooper through that. And then they were there at Thanksgiving, and I think we had one more trip with them over there during a break, or we took them out of school, because it was worth it. You know, they loved it. And they have said, this is so funny, and a note to any of the people who are listening, if you've got younger children, you think that's something you can't afford ever, had I known now what I learned then, or had I known then what I learned while we were there, I would have saved the pennies for that, because they have the experience that gives a kid in life, but also it builds towards what they're doing in education, right? And so as they need to write reports, or they need to do research, or they need to look for jobs on their own, it gives them a lot of fodder for those kind of things. And so, yeah, it was life-changing for all of us.
That sounds so fun. I would love to do that. So where in Germany were you?
A little town called Burghausen. It's got the largest castle in the world, and I rode my bike to a castle every day. Really, I took full advantage of that when I lived there. I have this thing about princess dresses. You just have to know me to understand. I'm not a girly girl, but it's a thing about dress up. I still do it at my age. I recommend it. It's fun. My friends just roll their eyes and go with it. I might show up in a princess dress, you know, when we're doing something. Anyway, it was about an hour east of Munich and 45 minutes west of Salzburg. So
Is that like, okay.
Sound of Music country.
So what was the name of the town?
Berghausen.
Okay.
Yeah, it was right on
the name of the castle in that town.
The Berghausen Castle.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we were on the Austrian border. So just a great, I learned that there's a big difference between living in a small town and living in like a Berlin or a Munich, a large city. We loved the small town. It was incredible.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. Sign me up. Sign me up for that.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so great. Well, okay. So Robin, tell us about this book you just wrote.
Well, the title of it is For All Who Wander, Why Knowing God is Better Than Knowing It All. And it's memoir, spiritual memoir, and it's about growing up in the church and knowing all the right things to think, say, and do, and then suddenly finding yourself in a position where you question everything you've ever professed or believed. And what happens then? And it's a story of God's faithfulness to me in that, how he redeemed a really, really tough season in my life. And it wasn't the book I was planning on writing. It's kind of crazy. Can I tell you how it came to even be?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a long-term blogger. I actually started in 2005, so 1,000 years ago in blog years, and never had any plans to do anything with it. It was just, I had the time. I was a writer. My background is PR and marketing. And so it was just what I did for a lot of years. And then came this season that is largely takes place in the book, right? It was a years long season. And I stepped back from writing I stepped back certainly from the online space and was not active there. It was a place that really, I think God got me out of it for a reason. And that was because what happened when I was there. And I started writing a book that had been on my heart and mind for a while. And I just started writing it quietly. Only one person really knew that I was doing this, a friend that I got connected with just randomly. And so she knew about it. And then I was approached by Dayspring. I've written for the Encourage community for a lot of years. I think a lot of your listeners may be familiar with Encourage. And they approached me about writing a trade book for them. And as I looked through the concept and what the felt need was for the Encourage community, for women who might be struggling in life, not necessarily the same type of struggle with doubt that I had experienced, but questioning their value and their worth and identity, all those questions. I'm looking at this one page and I'm like, no one else can write that book. That is my story to tell. And so it was a little bit backwards when someone approaches you about writing a book for a reason like that. The proposal process hasn't taken place. However, it worked itself out. Just at every point along the way, there was confirmation that this was something that the Lord was really, when I say that gift at midlife, to live in Germany for a year was a gift from the Lord. This book, for me to write it in that season, was perfect timing, undeniably Him. And it really allowed me to see Him in a way I had not seen Him in that hard season. So a little bit of a long explanation, but for anyone who is struggling with doubt or unbelief or questioning their faith, my great hope, and having gone through the pain of writing that, because at some points during the writing of it, it was really tough to see who I was in that season. I was a little bit of a monster, maybe. To see the redemption of all that and to see the faithfulness of God in all of that, to understand how that was a maturing time, not a waste of time. People need to know that. If anyone is in that season right now, it is a message that I was desperate to hear then. It's why I was obedient to write it over the past couple of years, and why I'm excited for it to get in your listeners' hands or anyone's hands who might need to hear a word from the Lord. Not that I'm speaking for God, but I think He used my experience to share with others. That experience didn't happen for no reason. It happened for His glory.
Hmm. Can you share with us a little about what put you in that place of doubt?
Well, I've said this with friends as we've talked through the book. The parable of the frog in a pot of boiling water. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a story I've heard 1,000 times over, and it's put a frog in a pot of boiling water, and he is going to jump out in an instant because he knows he's in trouble. But put him in a pot of pond water, lukewarm, it feels good, and slowly start turning up the heat, and he is halfway to being cooked before he knows he's in any danger. And so that the latter is who I was. I think I was living this life, as I said, with my writing. It was just a thing that I did, and that it became more and more important in my life. There were a lot of things going on externally with kids, with family, with a disconnect from any real community. We had come from a place when we were in Tennessee during this time. We had come from a place where we had vibrant, well-connected community, to a place where everything wasn't tracking as we were accustomed, and it wasn't for lack of trying. So I slowly fell into that, I call it the matrix, the online world of that becoming so important to me. My blog became incredibly important to me, and you'll hear me talk about it in the writing as it became an idol, and I served it well. And I served it to the best of my ability. And I think, when we look at idolatry, what that means in our lives, I think we all have those things we serve that may be a good thing, that may be a great thing, but it becomes to have a point of preeminence that it was never designed to have. And, I think that can be fitness. You can worship fitness. You can worship diet. You can worship your family, your marriage, your job, volunteerism, anything that seeks to displace God. And that's what I was doing, not realizing it. It's not something that I was aware of. I just knew that I was striving. I was frustrated on a personal level with lack. And when you have lack, that can begin to inform everything else, right? And so, it was this thing that began to whittle away at belief for me. It wasn't like it was the one thing that affected my belief. It was all of life, and then a huge struggle within the context of my actual church. And it was in that season that I began to hate church. I dreaded Sunday mornings. I would pray through the entire service for God to change my heart. And it was this constant, it was a teeter-totter of belief and unbelief. I so understand that story, that tension. And all the while, this feeds self-loathing. You hate yourself when you're in that season of doubt. If you care about those things, if that is a place where, again, as a lifelong churchgoer, And I worked at a church for 10 years. I knew all the things. Not that I know everything in scripture, by no means am I saying that, nor am I a Bible scholar, but I knew the culture. I knew how to perform. I knew it from the outside in. And I even knew that there was a difference between head and heart knowledge. You can know all the things without your life being changed in such a significant level that you know that you know that you know. So the story ends up with me where I was at a point of walking away from not just the church, but my faith altogether. Felt like it was a better way to live. I thought morality was important. I love the Judeo-Christian ethic. I love the words of scripture, but was I buying them? Not necessarily. And so when I was at that point where I was done and ready to let go, I so much felt like it's a concrete visual. Picture yourself letting go, holding onto a rope, and you're letting go, and God reaches out to grab you by the wrist. And that's what he did with me, essentially. And so as you're walking out of it, only then can you see in hindsight all the things that were going on. Really, this was a long time ago for me. And yet, writing it down, working it out on paper, and through really having to live in that space again, I saw things I had never seen. The parallels that were going on in life to faith were incredible to see. I actually went back to my husband and I apologized to him because of what I had not seen in season, in that dark place, in the wander, in the spiritual wrestle. I had not seen it. And it was so clear to me now. So it's a rough place to be when you're in it. And I think the beauty of hanging on in God's faithfulness, because he desires our return. And I think probably one of the most important things I discovered was doubt in and of itself is not a sin. As I said, there was so much self-loathing. I wanted to believe, but I wasn't going to lie anymore. I wasn't going to play that game. And he was using what I felt like was failure in my life, the doubt, the questions, the unbelief, the uncertainty, the frustrations. He was using that as a bridge back to him. It was not a wedge driving me away. It was the long way to get back to him, but it was not what I perceived it to be. It was not failure. It was actually a means, I guess, of sanctification, of me working out my faith.
Okay. Alex, are you noticing her going in and out a little bit, or is that not happening on your end?
Not at all.
It's not on your end?
Mm-mm.
Okay,
I hear
good.
it. I do hear it on your end, Krista, but not with Alex.
Okay. So what did it feel like, or what were your indicators during that season that allowed you to know, like, I'm not really at home, with myself or with God? Like, what were some indicators that maybe things weren't going so well?
I think the big one for us was there were some real things, there were real dynamics going on in the church that we attended at the time that were difficult. And that maybe my response to that was an indicator that all was not well. I think on the other side of that, there were really some issues that needed to be resolved that were not being resolved in a place of worship. And so the place of preeminence that someone in the church gives to the church, when it fails them in some way, and we're flawed people. These were flawed people doing what they thought was right, making decisions that were difficult to understand, but I think the way I processed them was an indicator. Also, the great value. I think signs were there. My friends in real life, and these were people, long-term people in my life, not the people had been in this city for not a long time. This was when we were in Tennessee after having lived in South Carolina most of our married life, or all of our married life up until that point, who were dropping hints. They were dropping breadcrumbs that things were not well with me. But who knows how to articulate that? How does a friend articulate those things to you? There were some things I found out down the road, but I didn't know it at the time. And so we were trying for community. We were trying to we're initiators. We are hospitality people. We love to sit around a table for hours and just have great conversation face to face. That's who we had been. And what we knew to be our normal, and it wasn't materializing the way we had always seen it happen before in our lives. The other big one for me was this striving in the blogosphere. When I started, no one was making any money doing anything. We were all just a bunch of hack writers out there connecting with the blog. No one showed their pictures. No one would ever think about putting their kid's face online. It's so funny now, the differences between then and now. And so I began to make real connections with people, right? And it was cool, but I knew too much about them. They knew too much about me. I knew more about them than I did with people in my real life, right? I wasn't trying to sow into that community, but it was almost the path of least resistance, because it wasn't happening in my real life at the level of depth that I so longed for. I'm not a surface person. I want to go deep with you. And so when it only goes so far over and over again, and there are dear people that I love even now in that place, in terms of community, that's something that my husband and I could celebrate together, wasn't happening. So I went with the path of least resistance. These people online were a lot of fun, right? And it was when people commented on blogs, and there were deep, conversations going on in the comment thread, and it was just so fun. And then things changed, and people started making money, and brands started tapping into a blogger's influence and how they could capitalize on that and compensate the bloggers. And I began to see vocation for myself again. As an at-home mom, you don't get a lot of validation for changing diapers, for cooking dinner, for keeping the house clean, for basically staying up to date with laundry. Your kids are not going to thank you for clean socks. Generally speaking, maybe those miracle children will, but mine didn't. And so I began to gain a sense of significance in that world. So you better bet that I was spending time there. I was trying to think. It was just a hustle of trying to figure out how I could be one of those who made it in that world. And as time progressed, I saw a lot of great things happening for people that I loved and that I was cheering on, but it wasn't happening for me, not in the way that I anticipated. And so that didn't mean I wasn't trying. And I think, I don't think God is not punitive. He is not a vindictive God. He is gracious, and he is a for us God, right? But I think his way of being for me was saying, okay, sister, let's see, you are resourceful. You like to do things in your own strength. Let's see what that looks like. And so I lived that way for a lot of years. And I had a lot of hurt in that space. I think, it makes me so ill now to think about it. I was a victim in some ways. And that is one of those things as a parent that we rail against, right? We would not allow our kids to be victims of their teachers or classmates or circumstance or sports or whatever. And I think I played that role pretty well. Didn't realize it till I was writing this book that I had done that. When I went to my husband, that was one of those things I said, was I playing a victim at times? And he said, how could he win on that question? He knew the truth, but he didn't want to answer it. That being said, I think that being hurt in that space, God allowing me to do things in my own strength, and then to have to come to terms with what that was looking like, put me in a position to finally see him and hear from him. I had to go low. I had to go low before I could look up and see him. So it's all good. None of it was wasted. Do I want to relive that junk? Heck no, man. I would love to save anyone from having to endure whatever their pain points are. Mm-hmm. But we learn from the pain. I feel like that season had to last for the season that it lasted to make an impression on this hard head of mine. And it also, one thing that, it's so cool to see some of the good things that were going on, because when you're going through that, no one would have ever known that I felt this way. No one would have understood how hurt I was in a social setting. I was alone in a crowd often. No one would have ever guessed that, I don't think. It wasn't something I could even articulate really, because it was so foreign to who I was. And yet, in a season like that, though I was so sad in my faith, though I was so sad in the interior places, I was still active in a Bible study. I was still praying. I was still presenting as a believer. I was still having impact in my kids' lives and in their friends' lives. And so I think life is rarely all or nothing. I think we want to compartmentalize it and make it be either or, but for me, it was very much both and.
Mhm. Did you hit a point where you felt like you could share that whole other side of you that maybe people wouldn't see externally? As somebody who craves going deep, where did you turn first to share, I'm having these doubts?
The only person that I really remember telling was I finally told Tad. You know, he had to have known that something was going on with me that way. He knew I did not want to go to church, that I had wanted to leave our church. We were in a church 4.5 years without a pastor. And it was a large church. And so that was really tough with the things that were going on in the in-between. He knew I wanted to leave long before we finally left. And the funny thing is, when we finally made that decision is the year we ended up going to Germany. And it wasn't because of that. We found out right after the fact. But I admitted it to him. And I said, I don't even know if I don't have any problem with believing that God is who he says he is. But my problem is, I don't even know if I believe that there is a God. I was at that dark of a place. And he just pointed me back. It was a pretty hard response. He said, I don't see you sowing into that. I don't see you seeking. I don't see you looking for answers in the right places. So, you know, his inference was that, well, you're reaping what you're sowing, sort of. And so that was a defining line for me, because it was such a concrete memory of that conversation with him. I don't think he would remember it because it was not significant to him in the way that it was significant to me. And the response that I had is so counterintuitive to me. Even as I speak it out loud to you now, it seems really odd that this would have been how I proceeded. I proceeded by seeking God. I proceeded by praying prayers that I did not even believe were effective prayer. And I actually was pretty, I call myself a brat during that season. I would demand things of God in that season. If you are real, if you are who you say you are, you're going to have to reveal yourself to me. And I call them lifelines. There were several times that he was gracious to give this bratty daughter of his a glimpse of who he is in the face of my unbelief, when I was literally daring him to prove himself to me, that he would give me a physical manifestation of that. And I don't want to give too much of that away, because it's really great story in my life, because those are the things that I go back to. Look, I'm at a place where my faith is deeper and more precious to me than it's ever been. I kind of joke, as an empty nester and as a writer, I have to create social opportunity and opportunities to be with people. And I'm attending 2 Bible studies right now, right? One, I had the privilege of being a small group leader, and the other one, I'm strictly there to learn. And for the first time in my life, my adult life, I'm so hungry for the word. And it is significant and meaningful to me. And it is life-changing and life-giving and real, and not words on the page. And y'all, this is from a lifelong churchgoer who has been active in ministry all of her adult life. You know, it's just crazy to me how you can have such a disconnect with it. And yet, I think because I was seeking God in the midst of my doubt, he showed himself to me, you know? And, there's a lot, is there not a lot going on in the Christian headlines anyway these days about people leaving the church or people struggling with doubt? And some pretty high profile people who have, if not renounced their faith, are questioning their faith. And I'm like, I was just bewildered. Why did I remain? Why did I come back in greater measure? Why did God allow that? I mean, it makes me emotional. Why me? And I felt very strongly, I was not looking to you for the answers, Alex or Krista, as leaders, as beautiful Christian women of faith. I was not looking at any celebrity, any pastor. I was not looking at the church universal. I was looking at God. And I think that's why he preserved this faith for me. I think that's why. And he in the way that he redeems all things, put me in a position to put this on paper, to hopefully encourage someone else, if nothing else, to point them to him as the means for finding ultimately what you're seeking.
Mm-hmm.
So, what encouragement would you have to someone who maybe is walking with their own children or a spouse who is in that place of doubt and they don't really know how to respond or what to do? And they, I think especially as parents, we feel out of control and we feel like there's really nothing I can do. Has to be the work of God. But what encouragement would you have for them? And maybe what tips would you have for them in walking with someone who's in doubt?
Krista, that is such a great question. And I don't have all the answers, but I can offer this. One, don't worry. Okay, when you worry can lead to sin, worry can be a sin, and that is not productive. You will not accomplish a thing with that. What you can do, and I don't say this lightly, you pray for that wanderer, right? You earnestly pray for them, and you get close to the Lord. You do everything you can to be close to the Lord so that you can be a reflection of that to your children, to your spouse, to the friends that you love who are really struggling. You also give that person space and invite the conversation, and you listen. You keep your mouth shut. If anyone had tried to defend, if I had been brave enough, right? I was a big fat chicken. If I had been brave, because we get into this in the book, I'm a people pleaser. I say I'm in recovery, and I think I will be the rest of my life as a pleaser. Middle kid, Lord, I've got it all in spades. But you give that person space to admit their doubt, and you let it sit. Somehow just the exercise of giving voice to it and admitting it diffuses its strength, I think. The more you talk about it, the less power it has over you. And you ask that person, if, a child, depending on their age, a young kid, this is a child who has enough cognitive ability to really be wrestling with hard and holy things. You ask them what they need from you, right? How often do we ask the person, what is it do you need me just to sit with you? Do you need me to cry with you? Do you need me to pet your hair and make you soup or bring you your favorite coffee drink? I don't know what it is, but you give them a wide berth to wrestle. Wrestling is messy. Wrestling isn't quick. Wrestling and coming to a truer faith it can be an overnight thing. I think God can heal that and show himself mightily in an instant. But I think for most of us, it's the working it out. It's the wrestling with it that allows the impression to be seared from our skin into our hearts, into the deep places, the marrow places, And so it is, give them the book, once it's out, say that might help them. But you just point them to Jesus however you can. You don't preach at them. You just love them, lead them to the cross, and you lead them to the cross by quietly being there yourself.
I appreciate that. It seems like it's honoring the other person's process, even when it may feel frustrating for us. I think Krista's right, especially when it's our kids and we feel like we want you to listen to us. We know what we're talking about. And yet this whole free will situation that God has given our children as well as us lets them have that process. And
you rob something of them if you try to. It's going to be an effect of telling someone you just have to believe. It's not going to make them just believe. If someone had told me that would have frustrated me, and it could have sent me further into despair, because again, it may be different for someone who is an adult who comes to faith older, who hasn't grown up in that whole culture of Christianity, of church culture. But when that's who you identify as, who you've always considered yourself to be, it's hard. You're wrestling with tough things. And for someone to try to bootstrap you out or tell you to bootstrap yourself out of it, you said a really great word. You're validating their struggle. And that there's freedom in that. There is so much freedom when you extend, and they aren't expecting that. The doubter is expecting you to defend the faith. They're expecting you to try to tell them what they need to do. And it is always best, I think, when it may be messy, it may be ugly, it may be with a lot of pain and mistakes and failures and sin and obstinance and all those arrogance, all those things. But if you can just keep pointing them back to Jesus, I think that's the best thing you can do for them.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate you sharing your story. And I think it's just a very common one, whether it's ourselves or it's someone we know or someone right in our own homes. People are struggling with those bigger questions and have doubts about God. And I always appreciate it when I hear someone say from the pulpit, especially, God can handle your doubts. He can handle your questions. Like, this is not too big for him. He's not overwhelmed or in crisis by your questions. That God welcomes them. He didn't, it's okay. And to allow that space, but yet it's so hard. And I think especially as moms, it's so hard to let that process play out. And so that patience that God is building in us, why that's happening in our kids, is a big deal.
You actually just threw a lifeline to anyone who hears this podcast, Krista. The words you just used, those were some of the exact words that my pastor used. And this was early in my wander. And that was something I clung to, that was something I clung to, that God was not offended by my questions and that he could handle them, and he invited them. And again, as I said, I took the long way back, but that was a bridge back to him. Those questions, that doubt, it only fueled my faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So great, Robin. Well, thank you. Well, before we let you go today, we do want to just ask you a little bit about your fun self, because you have all sorts of energy and I love it. So, Robin, tell us about some things that you can't live without.
Well, it's a running joke in my family between me and Tad. I have a nighttime ritual, and it's every night, whether I'm traveling or at home, I have to have my Neutrogena face wipes to take off my makeup because I am lazy, and soap and water is 2 steps, right? Or any kind of cleanser. I have to use the wipes, and then I always have to use EOS lip balm, and it doesn't matter what flavor. I love them all.
That's so funny. I have 2 of those are my routine too, part of it. Yeah.
And then my last is a lavender vanilla lotion. I have to lotion my hands and my elbows before I go to sleep every night. It's so obnoxious. It even drives me crazy that I do that. Addicted to Icebreakers gum, any of the mint flavors. Mm-hmm. It's in my car. It's in my bag. It's in my house. We have a gum drawer. How many people have a gum drawer?
I do.
That makes me feel better about myself.
I do.
Thank you very much. And I'm a reader. I think all writers are readers too. So I'm great at starting books. I'm not as great at finishing them. But, I juggle those more often than I like to admit.
Mm-hmm. What are you reading right now?
Well, okay, so I'm kind of all over the map. It's kind of embarrassing to admit. You're going to see how crazy I am. I am reading, I've just discovered Max Lugavere. It's Genius Foods. Stumbled onto a podcast with him, and it was about an interview, the brain-food connection. And there is dementia in my family on both sides. And so as I am aging, I'm thinking more about those types of things. He is compelling as a speaker. He is compelling as an author. And so I'm reading Genius Foods right now. But the contradiction, and why I'm embarrassed to admit this, is I'm also reading Samin Nosrat's Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. Holy cow.
Oh, yes. That Netflix series.
Yes. Her documentary is fantastic. She is an incredible writer, and an incredible teacher. And her love for the ingredient, the way she talks about salt is a work of art. So I'm reading that. It makes it a little harder because all the things in her cookbook are not also in Max's book. So they might be at war with one another, as a matter of fact. But then I also have some really great, some friends have had recently released books, Christian women's living kind of books. And Becky Keefe's No Better Mom for the Job. She is a great young voice for motherhood. Rochelle Parham is a friend who has written a book called Mythical Me. And it's about finding freedom from comparison as one who lived in a space for a long time, that whole blogging space, that comparing myself and falling short every time. This book is liberating. That's one that I've read, and those two books I'm giving as gifts. They are great gift books. Then Sarah May's The Complicated Heart, hard story between mother and daughter, but finding a lot of freedom in that. Those are five books that I have open, and they are all in process right now.
So there's another book you mentioned I wanted to ask you about, and it's Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. What is that book?
That is a writer's kick in the butt. I'm telling you, if you haven't read it, it's one of the ironies about me writing this book at all, my book for all who wander. I started writing a different book. This was in November, a couple of years ago. And then I picked up Stephen's book and read through this dissertation on resistance, essentially. And resistance is all the forces that are against you in life and art, right? And it doesn't matter what your art is, whatever your passion is, whatever you're called to say or do, or who you're called to be in this world, there is something that is going to fight you in that. And I just, I'm using air quotes right now for your listeners. I just happened to pick it up and read it right before I was approached. I mean, I had no timeline with the book I was writing. It was just something that I was doing because it was time and it was a story I wanted to tell. But when I was on a deadline with the Encourage, with the Lifeway Dayspring book, and I had just read this, it was a kick in the behind every time I needed to keep going. I understood that this was a good word, that the Lord brought the opportunity to me, and Stephen's words were used in my life to make sure I finished what I started. So I cannot recommend it highly enough because it was effective for me as a writer.
Love it. I hope that one's on Audible. That sounds like one I could get through on Audible.
Yeah, and then you might have it on repeat. Like when you start sinking in a passion in a pet project, he'll give you a little kick in the butt.
Yeah. Okay, what about a favorite tradition?
There is, as an empty nester, I'm in an in-between time right now. My kids are all scattered all over the country, hours away from their mama. We don't live near any of our family. But a tradition that we had for 17 years was a mother-in-law tradition of a Valentine tea party. And so my mother-in-law is a mom of 4 boys. And when their first grandchild, my daughter, was born, and it was a girl, she came to me very early on and asked me if we could have a Valentine tea party every year, and Rachel could invite all of her friends. And then when she was 16, we would have a sweet 16 girl-boy party. How precious is that? As it turned out,
so cute.
Yeah, it never turned into we never had a Sweet 16 party, but it just kept evolving. It went from a largely friend thing to a family thing. And we would sit around the table with all the girl cousins, all my sisters-in-law. So there are 4 sisters-in-law and my mother-in-law's best friend. And we would sit and do life together once a year. And so Valentine was co-opted for me from a romantic holiday to this even better holiday where you celebrate the women in your life right there. And it was just a beautiful, non-commercial time. I mean, I guess Valentine's is pretty cheesy commercially, but for us, it was special and something I look forward to year round. And just that older women speaking life into the younger women. And these little girls had to sit around a table and be relatively quiet when they were pretty young. So it was great in terms of discipline and learning respect and how to
That's so darling and so great, because Valentine's Day, I mean, Man, talk about ups and downs when you're growing up, right? You either have a Valentine or you don't. You're kind of depressed about that, or you know what I mean? There's a lot of like, well, just roller coaster rides of Valentine's Day. And so that just makes it special. It's just all women and you're all just loving on each other. And it's awesome.
Well, and then I did when I moved here a couple of years ago, I did resurrect it for a couple of years. And it was not a mother-daughter thing. It was a friend thing. It was my mother-in-law is actually at end of life right now. We're having a long goodbye as she is continues to decline from dementia herself. But I had it to honor her. It was such a special thing for her. And so it's a Sarah Dance, memorial Valentine tea party. And it's really nothing but joy. It is nothing but joy.
What a sweet way to honor her. That's really, really beautiful. I love that.
I figure Tad can give me flowers any day of the year. February 14th isn't one day I need it. I don't need no stinking guy. Give me the girls.
Yeah.
Yeah. Valentine's is a special day at our house too. And I think probably I would just guess a house full of girls, it's a bigger deal than a house full of boys. Maybe.
No, that's truth. That's truth.
It's a big deal around here. And
that makes me happy.
Yeah. And it my girls have never had a boyfriend, so it's never been a romantic thing. It's always been just a party.
As it should be. Carry on. I love that.
Yeah, carry on. Okay, what about a favorite recipe or two?
Well, I am known worldwide for my apple pie. And the only downside to being known worldwide about your apple pie is that you have to take it everywhere you go. So wherever there's food. And I think what makes it, and it's a friend's recipe, got it, I don't know how many years ago, and she actually shared her recipe with me. What makes it special is the crust. It's and that's where it drives me a little crazy to have to make the homemade crust, but it's done a little bit differently. It's processed. And so that is a favorite one in my family. And I'm not a big apple pie lover, but it really blesses my heart when people request it. So that one, I get a lot of hits to my blog for an apple pie, and I'm not a food blogger. But my go-to, because I am trying to eat healthier and be mindful, I'm actually very health conscious in my old age. I was McDonald's French fries all the way, baby, when I was younger. and then my Chick-fil-A addiction after that. But roasted vegetables is my go-to, and I will toss anything in olive oil, kosher salt, cracked pepper, and it is magical. Mm-hmm. So that is every meal pretty much has a roasted vegetable. And so that's to honor Max, because when I make that homemade pasta, it's going to honor Samin, right? The book I'm reading. So I'm going, gotta live a little amidst all that health. So those are those are some go-tos. One wonderful for one reason and the other wonderful for another.
So great. Well, Robin, thank you. This has been so fun to have you on and to meet you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I had a great time, and I really hope to hug you in person one day.
Would love it. Yeah, I'm coming to the movie set.
Yeah, we're gonna go we're gonna go be zombie extras. That those.
Oh, actually, I met one of my friends, Melanie Dale, is a zombie extra, and she was showing me all of the pictures the other day, and I just could not believe it. That she is one of those zombies.
That is amazing.
She's another Christian writer and blogger and, a podcaster. And anyway, I was cracking up because she does not look like herself when she's a zombie. I'll just say that.
I would hope not. I would really. Let's hope for her sake.
All right, Robin, have a great day.
Y'all have a great afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.